in which the justification for our support of those particular governments is based upon, to a certain extent anyway, their support for our side in the war against radical Islam. It is a question I have that really has never been satisfactorily answered, and that is this. Is there a specific criteria that the State Department uses to determine at what point we become an apologist for a country that otherwise would not be the case? That is to say, we would, if that one factor, their support for our efforts in the war against radical Islam, if that were not there, we would be on a decidedly different relationship with them. We would be antagonistic about them because of their human rights abuses. Is there some criteria, specific criteria that the State Department uses to determine at what point we change from being antagonistic because of their human rights abuses to being supportive, even though they have? Because it seems quite confusing to me. In certain conditions, in certain situations, we seem to overlook these human rights abuses, and others we don't. I think this condition here in Ethiopia, for existence, and on the other hand, the MEK, where we have them on the terrorist watch list, we refuse to participate with them, and yet, of course, for years they have done absolutely nothing that poses a threat to the United States, but they have acted inside Iran. And we are protecting them in one area. It is a totally subjective analysis, case by case. This country's done just about enough to get us into the position of supporting their efforts. This group or this country hasn't. Can you tell me that? Can you help me understand what the thinking process is inside the State Department to determine which countries we will support, even if their human rights abuses are as identified in these reports in Ethiopia?
There is no such criteria, and nor is it subjective, because as the chairman clearly pointed out, our human rights report speaks very clearly to the human rights concerns of the U.S. government in Ethiopia, just as it does for other countries around the world. And so there's no point at which we will ignore human rights of a country because of their assistance on other areas. Our relationship with Ethiopia is a complex relationship. It's a multifaceted relationship. It is not solely a relationship based on the terror threat in the Horn of Africa. It is not. It is in fact a much more complex relationship, and so we continue to engage them on issues of democratization, on issues of human rights. As I said, the majority of our budget of the $300 million that we provide is on those other areas. It's not, in fact, on support on terrorism. And so there is no point at which we will ignore a country's human rights record or its democratization record. We are, in fact, involved and engaged in trying to strengthen those institutions, urge the government to hold accountable those in its security forces that are that carry out abuses, just like we do governments around the world. So to your question, there is no point at which we will ignore. There is no point at which a country crosses and therefore is no longer subject to our concerns about human rights and democratization.
I appreciate that, and I appreciate the fact that in the country reports there are references to these abuses. I must tell you that there does seem to be, from time to time, a significant difference in terms of the reports that are produced by the Department of State about these countries and the actions that follow them. A report stating something, stating the outrageous events and that there's opposition to it is one thing, but it becomes a very confusing situation for, I think, for members of Congress to understand how, on the one hand, those reports can identify such atrocities, and on the other hand, we can identify also actions taken on the part of our government to support those governments. It's just a confusing situation, that's all I'm suggesting, and it's, I think, likewise confusing for even the State Department to explain. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have no other questions.
Thank you very much. Dr. Boza?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Very quickly, in the past you've said that the United States is considering declaring Eritrea a state sponsor of terrorism. One of the groups that they are sponsoring is the ONLF. Do you consider the ONLF a terrorist organization?
We have not made that determination. I think that we really looked at the ONLF differently after the killing of the Chinese workers in the Ogaden, but we haven't declared it a terrorist organization. I think that the Ethiopian ambassador has raised concerns about double standards, and when this group is attacking and killing Ethiopians, it's ignored. But to your specific question, no, we have not defined.
So we haven't really done that, but that's something that you're very definitely watching and considering that perhaps that designation might fit.
I think that the ONLF should really take a moment to pursue the track that Congressman Payne set out, which is to renounce violence, to try through negotiation, through political dialogue, to address the concerns of the people of the Ogaden, the marginalization, the humanitarian concerns, the human rights concerns, that they're at a critical juncture, and that a utilitarian effort to get resources from any old group, including AIAI and Al-Shabaab, will put them in a very dangerous path. So certainly I think this is a critical moment for the ONLF.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Secretary. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Mr. Smith has a very quick question.
The 1,600 plus peacekeepers in Somalia, they're doing a wonderful job, I'm sure, but they're under-resourced. What are we doing to get that to 8,000? And the Ogaden UN human rights investigation, you mention it, but you don't say whether or not it's going to happen, whether or not you think it'll happen, and what we're doing to try to promote that, so that we get an independent look there as well.
Yes, thank you. We're training 2 battalions of Burundians right now. That training perhaps will come to an end, I think, on October 5th or so. And then we're looking at equipping and deploying those forces to Somalia. We're also, Secretary Rice, in her meeting with President Yar'Adua at UNGA, also asked him again about having a battalion. He said that they're training right now, so they're looking at putting forces in as well. And in her meeting with President Kufuor, she also discussed the Ghanaians putting forces in, and we're going to send planners to Ghana to try to prepare their forces for going in. So we are actively looking to other African countries. We're also urging the UN to do planning for a possible takeover of the AMISOM force in the future. So we're working on it. Our ambassador, Dan Yamamoto, has informed me that the Ethiopian Human Rights Commission or Committee is supposed to go to the Ogaden, or may even have gone, to investigate these allegations. We support the UN call for an independent investigation of human rights abuses in the Ogaden as well.
Thank you very much, and I would hope that there could be an independent investigation. As you know, there was a committee to investigate the killings, and when the committee came up with their findings, the administration said change it, and the judge who was chairman said he wouldn't, and the commission left Ethiopia because they know they would have been in prison or killed. So how are you going to have the government of Ethiopia sending a group to the Ogaden to investigate? It needs to be an impartial United Nations group, or someone who can be, even if it's IGAD, or someone that's like the fox is watching the chicken coop. Ms. Woolsey, did you have a question?
No, Mr. Chairman, I was just futzing because I yielded my time so we